Shakespeare presents a pretty clear picture of the negative consequences of taking more than what you are entitled to, when he traces the fate of Antonio, who usurped his brother Prospero's title as the Duke of Milan. The play serves as a warning to us not to become too ambitious or to take more than what is rightfully ours. Shakespeare condemns Antonio's greed from the beginning of the play. In Act 1, Scene 2, Prospero tells his daughter Miranda the story of how they came to be on the island. He explains how he had entrusted the smooth running of the state to his brother while he busied himself with the bettering of my mind. When he tells how Antonio betrayed his trust and overthrew him, he does so in very critical terms. He uses the metaphor of the ivy which had hid my princely trunk and sucked my verdure out on't, to compare his brother to a parasitic vine that fed off the greater vitality of another plant. Furthermore, Antonio's taste of power sparked a greater ambition in him, which Prospero says awaked an evil nature, personifying or giving human qualities to his darker side, which was now awake and ready to pounce. According to Prospero, due to his ambition to credit his own lie, he did believe he was indeed the Duke. In other words, once Antonio had been given the power of a duke, he began to believe that he was absolute Milan, or the true and rightful ruler of Milan, even though he wasn't. Prospero isn't just critical of Antonio because of the personal betrayal. He explains that what hurt him the most was the way Antonio sacrificed the autonomy of Milan to achieve his ambition. In order to oust Prospero, Antonio needed the money and support of a wealthy patron and asked Alonso, the King of Naples, for help, even though Alonso is a sworn enemy of Prospero. Prospero uses personification when he describes Milan as a dukedom yet unbowed, to show how, under his leadership, the state had stood proudly and independently. This contrasts greatly with the ignoble stooping which it is forced to endure after Antonio agrees to subject his coronet to his crown, which means that Milan will essentially be a subject of Naples by paying an annual tribute and acknowledging the greater power and honour of Alonso. Miranda's emphatic response, "Oh, the heavens!" reinforces the terrible blow that this was to the state of Milan. Look at the negative adjectives that Shakespeare uses here to describe Antonio and his actions: treacherous, foul, and acting in the dead of darkness. Nighttime symbolises the evil that lies behind the betrayal, so Shakespeare is leaving us with no doubt as to how he feels about Antonio's greed. But there is a little bit more to the story. Prospero isn't necessarily just the poor brother who had everything stolen from him by his false brother. Shakespeare shows us that perhaps Prospero's own greed is to blame for his usurpation. Prospero tells Miranda how Gonzalo provided them in their exile with clothes and other necessary items. One item that Prospero is especially grateful for is his library, which is filled with volumes that I prize above my dukedom. Wait, what? He has just told us that he finds his books to be more valuable than his country. This indicates that Prospero positioned his own thirst for knowledge and development of his magical powers above the governing of his state. This is pretty strange, considering how angry he is with Antonio for kicking him out. Perhaps Shakespeare is hinting that Prospero deserved to be overthrown for pursuing his own selfish, greedy ends. When we actually get to meet Antonio for ourselves, it turns out that he is pretty much as Prospero described, greedy and ambitious. Not content with just overthrowing his own brother, in Act 2, Scene 1, he tries to further his own interests by convincing Sebastian that they should kill Alonso so that he can become King of Naples. He tries to spark some ambition in Sebastian by saying, My strong imagination sees a crown dropping upon thy head. The crown symbolising Sebastian becoming the next king. Sebastian's dubious moral character is illustrated at the beginning of the scene as he unkindly reminds Alonso that his son, Ferdinand, is most likely dead. Gonzalo criticises him, saying, "You rub the sore when you should bring the plaster," using a metaphor to suggest that Sebastian is betraying his relationship with his brother as his comments hurt Alonso rather than heal him. Antonio shows his duplicitous nature as he urges Alonso to rest, saying that he and Sebastian will guard your person while you take your rest and watch your safety, while he really plans to murder him. What a liar! Shakespeare uses dramatic irony here to reinforce Antonio's deceit. Dramatic irony is when the audience is aware of something that the characters aren't. In this case, Alonso is totally unaware of the plot to assassinate him that is unfolding on the stage. Antonio wastes no time in convincing Sebastian to follow his example. Sebastian says that he is standing water, a metaphor comparing him to stagnant and unmoving water. This means he has little ambition to make things happen. In reply, Antonio says, "I'll teach you how to flow." In other words, I'll teach you how to overcome the pesky obstacle of your living brother, who is the rightful king of Naples, and get the kingship that you want. Antonio uses his own success as evidence that his advice is trustworthy. He says, "Look how well my garments sit upon me, much feeter than before," metaphorically comparing his comfortable position as Duke of Milan to a set of well-fitting clothes. But what is in it for Antonio? Why would he get involved in helping Sebastian become king? After all, Shakespeare has shown us clearly that Antonio is a ruthless man who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Remember how we heard in Act 1 that Antonio agreed to pay a tribute to Alonso for helping him get rid of Prospero? Along with that tribute was the acknowledgement that Antonio would have to show respect and courtesy to Alonso, who would be the more powerful ruler. This would be pretty annoying for Antonio, who has shown that he likes to be the boss. When Sebastian agrees to the murder of his brother, he is so grateful to Antonio for helping him that he says, "One stroke shall free thee from the tribute which thou payest, and I the king shall love thee." He is saying that with one stroke of the sword, Alonso will be dead. Then Antonio will no longer have to pay the tribute, and he and Sebastian will be equals. While the murder is thwarted by Ariel, who wakes Alonso and Gonzalo in the nick of time, we have definitely seen Antonio and Sebastian's true colours, and they aren't pretty. Shakespeare furthers his criticism of excessive ambition and greed by contrasting the negative characterisation of Antonio and Sebastian with that of the noble and honest Gonzalo. Gonzalo acts altruistically, which means that he is more concerned with the well-being of others rather than himself. Already you can probably see a contrast with those backstabbing noblemen. Remember back in Act 1 when Prospero explained to Miranda that they only survived their exile on the island because of Gonzalo? Prospero tells how, when his own brother had betrayed him, "A noble Neapolitan, Gonzalo, did give us, with rich garments, linens, stuffs, and necessaries." He uses the epithet noble to describe Gonzalo, which highlights his positive characteristics. An epithet is an adjective that expresses an important quality of the person being described. We can also see examples of Gonzalo's selfless nature in Act 2, Scene 1, when he is trying to comfort Alonso, who is grieving the apparent loss of his son. He tries to find the silver lining in their situation by telling Alonso, "You have cause, so have we all, of joy, for our escape is much beyond our loss," meaning that they are lucky to be alive themselves. He describes their escape from the wreck as a miracle, using hyperbole or exaggeration to remind Alonso that he still has cause to celebrate. Shakespeare develops this characterization of Gonzalo to show his unwavering optimism as he tries to find the positive aspects of the island that they have been washed up on. He again uses hyperbole to exaggerate what he sees, saying, "Here is everything advantageous to life," in the hope that he can help lift Alonso out of his depression. Shakespeare also displays Gonzalo's selfless nature as he describes his imagined utopia, showing it to be vastly different to the way Antonio and Sebastian approach government and power. Where these men are ruthless in their pursuit of power, Gonzalo's ideal world is one with no government or rulers at all. He describes a world with riches, poverty, and the use of service, none. In other words, he wants a world where everyone is equal. As he lists other aspects of the greedy, selfish real world that he would do away with, he describes how everyone in his utopia would be innocent and pure. His language here likens it to a heavenly paradise where there is no sin, no pain, and no selfishness. What a world! Of course, Shakespeare shows Antonio and Sebastian to be highly critical of this world, heightening the contrast between the men. Shakespeare consolidates his point about the benefits of altruism by giving other selfless characters a happy ending. For example, the marriage of Ferdinand and Miranda, and the freeing of Ariel. Have you ever heard the saying that good things come to good people? These events symbolise this idea and remind us that we should try to be kind and generous in our treatment of others. Unlike other themes in his other plays, Shakespeare is pretty clear about the evils of greed and ambition here. Thank goodness. We hope you enjoyed this Schooling Online production. For more easy lessons on The Tempest, check out our analysis of the theme of justice in the play.